Mysterious deaths in protected areas of the United States rarely make it into the mainstream press. However, over the past decade, incidents that defy logical explanation have occurred in parks where professional rangers are present. No witnesses, no traces, no apparent cause. In 2013, the body of James Koffield was found in the Pisgah National Forest. There were no scratches on the outside. Inside, his skeleton was utterly shattered. 4 years later in Tennessee, Thomas Ames was standing waist-deep in a mountain river, dead. His brain was destroyed as if by a pressure wave. No blood, no injuries, only a tree bark in his hand. 2 years later, in Carter Caves, Kentucky, Ranger Megan Dowel ventures into the woods to search for a tourist who has been reported missing. 6 minutes later, she is found naked and mutilated, 2 kilometers from where she disappeared. 3 cases, different years, different states, but with frighteningly similar characteristics. Unexplained trauma, no signs of a struggle, recorded times, and the absolute impossibility of what happened. Who or what could have acted with such precision, such speed, and such force? Mysticism, secret technology, or something no one was supposed to see. One thing is clear: these deaths cannot be dismissed as accidents. Give us a thumbs up and we'll get started. Write your comments and we'll respond. The Pisgah National Forest, located in southwestern North Carolina, is part of the Appalachian Mountain Range. In the spring of 2013, routine patrols were conducted in the southern part of the forest. One of the Forest Service employees, 52-year-old James Koffield, was assigned to the area adjacent to Lake Sagahatchee, a remote location with dense stands of oak, maple, and hickory trees. According to the internal schedule, Koffield was supposed to leave his morning post for patrol on April 19th at around 8:30 a.m. He went alone, as he had done dozens of times before. The patrol area covered about 9 miles of forest along the northern shore of the lake. He was supposed to maintain contact every 2 hours via a Motorola XTS portable radio. Until 2 RPM, the signal was coming in without interruption. Then the connection was lost. When Koffield did not show up for his scheduled communication session at 5 p.m., the dispatcher tried to call him again. There was no response. The team on duty decided to wait until the next morning. At dawn on April 20th, a search party consisting of 3 Forest Service employees and a representative of the Henderson County Sheriff's Office left for the Sagahatchee area. The search began in the northwestern part of the lake. About 10 kilometers from the checkpoint, in a hollow between 2 hills, the team found the body of James Koffield. He was lying face down, with a backpack visible on his back, closed and undamaged. His weapon, a Ruger GP100 service revolver, was holstered. A metal whistle attached to a cord around his neck showed signs of melting, as if it had been exposed to high temperatures. There were no visible wounds on the body. His clothes, a green shirt with service insignia, dark trousers, and a jacket, were dry, with no traces of blood or dirt. There were also no signs of dragging or struggle around the body. The vegetation was not trampled, and the soil contained no footprints other than those of Koffield himself, which were recorded on the approach from the southwest. The official autopsy was performed by Dr. Hubert Lavery, the county medical examiner. The report, signed on April 23rd, noted multiple fractures of the chest, pelvis, limbs, and skull. The paradox was that no skin was torn. There were no bruises. All fractures were internal, with no external impact. As the expert noted, this type of injury is characteristic of explosive decompression or internal pressure, but no signs of such conditions were found. In addition to fractures, there were signs of massive internal bleeding in the lungs and the heart sac. Death occurred within 2 to 3 minutes after the critical destruction of internal structures. No poisons or traces of chemicals were found. The thermal burns on the neck, where the whistle was hanging, did not spread beyond the metal. Over the next 6 days, a team of experts from the Forest Service and county police investigated the area where the man died. There were no signs of fallen trees, landslides, or debris. No high points nearby from which a person could have fallen were found. Traces leading to the site of death ended within a radius of 5 meters. The ground in this area was dry, covered with leaves, and showed no signs of trampled turf or dents. According to Senior Ranger Paul Gregson, Koffield had no prior disciplinary or medical issues. He had worked for the department for over 20 years, had good references, and was in normal physical condition. Based on the analysis, the commission deemed Koffield's death unexplained and without external interference. No criminal case was opened due to the absence of signs of violent death. However, the case was referred to the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Center for Integrated Investigations as an anomaly on national forest land. At the time the internal audit report was published, in August 2013, there were no reported cases of similar injuries in the Pisgah area. Koffield's death remains the only such incident in the modern history of the region's Forest Service. The Forest Service's Emergency Incident Commission, established on April 30th, requested a technical examination of Koffield's radio and equipment. The radio showed no signs of overheating or discharge. It was not turned on when the body was found. The maps found in the backpack contained no additional markings beyond the standard route, which was marked with a marker. The GPS device attached to his belt was turned off and did not record his last route. The data for the previous days corresponded to the planned patrol. The search and analysis team also enlisted the help of specialists from the U.S. Geological Survey to rule out possible natural factors, including landslides, soil fractures, and local seismic activity. No seismic activity was recorded in the area of Lake Sakahachi 10 days before and 10 days after the incident. Radioactive background levels were within normal limits. No gas emissions that could have caused internal damage were detected. Military authorities did not confirm that any exercises, tests, or flights had taken place in the area. Given the remoteness of the location, a forest area accessible only on foot, the theory of outside interference was considered unlikely. On May 29, 2013, the case was officially closed. The cause of death was listed as traumatic multiple fractures of the skeletal system of unknown origin. Internal Forest Service documents were sent to Washington for archiving. No press release was issued, as the incident did not appear to pose a public threat. However, unofficial versions emerged in behind-the-scenes discussions among Henderson and Buncombe County Forest Service employees. One of the rangers, who wished to remain anonymous, noted that during the spring, several employees heard strange, low sounds in the area of the northern shore of the lake, like deep vibrations in the ground or a humming sound in the silence. None of these anomalies were officially documented. Another employee mentioned an incident that occurred 2 years earlier. According to him, in the same area where Koffield was found, 2 hunters disappeared in 2011. They went into the forest and never returned. A few days later, one of them was found disoriented and without equipment more than 20 kilometers from the starting point. The second was never found. Official reports linked the incident to alcohol poisoning, but the details remained vague. It is also known that in 1979, not far from the lake, an incident occurred involving the collapse of a tent belonging to a research group from East Carolina University. No one was injured, but the participants reported experiencing strong ground vibrations and a loud bang during the night, with no apparent external influence. This information has not been officially confirmed. The death of James Koffield remains one of the strangest and most unexplained in the history of the U.S. Forest Service. He was not attacked by a wild animal, did not have an accident, and did not die of hypothermia. His body did not have a single scratch, but all his bones were broken. A forensic examination ruled out a fall, drowning, collapse, and explosion. His death did not receive much public attention. No major newspaper covered the case. In the archives, it remained a routine case, closed with the wording, "Multiple internal injuries of unknown origin." His photo still hangs on a bulletin board in the Buncombe County Forest Service Administrative Building, in uniform, smiling with the caption, "James Koffield, 22 years of service. There are no official causes of death. There are many assumptions. There is no evidence. An equally strange case occurred in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, Tennessee, in 2017. On the morning of October 23, 2017, Ranger Thomas Ames arrived at the Great Smoky Mountains Station by his standard route. He was supposed to patrol along the north bank of Forney Creek, which was located between the Big Fork Ridge section and the Clansman Pass watershed. The weather was stable. The temperature was around 5 degrees, there was a light breeze, and no precipitation was expected. Ames drove his service vehicle to the parking lot near the old logging road, parked, grabbed his backpack, and set out on the trail at 9:15 a.m. According to the GPS attached to his uniform, he followed the designated route until 11:09 a.m. He then made a brief stop in the area known as the Silencer, an old flooded ravine where landslides were common in the last century. At 11:27, his GPS transmitted its last correct location. The coordinates pointed to the bed of the Forney Creek, near a bend called Split Spruce. After that, the device stopped transmitting a signal. When Ames did not report in at 4 p.m., the station duty officer tried to contact him by radio. There was no response. 18 minutes later, the standard check procedure was initiated. 2 rangers, Jake Savage and Daryl Montgomery, set out along Ames's route. At 6:30 p.m., they arrived at the parking lot and found Ames's SUV parked there, locked, with no signs of forced entry. Inside were his thermos, spare flashlight, and dry rations. His backpack and communication tablet were with him. The search continued at dawn the next day. 8 officers, including 2 K-9 units, began combing the area along the riverbed. At 10:48 a.m. on October 24th, Ranger Savage discovered the body. It was in the Forney River, about a mile from the last GPS signal. Thomas Ames was standing waist-deep in icy water, with his back to the current. He was wearing standard fall ranger gear, waterproof pants, a warm jacket, and a Park Service vest. He was not wearing a hat. His face was turned upward, his eyes open. At first glance, he could have appeared to be alive. Still, his body temperature was below 10 degrees. He had no pulse, and no breathing was detected. Photographing the body and securing its position took about half an hour. Distinguishing feature: no external signs of trauma. The icy water reached his stomach. His clothes were wet to the thighs, but his chest remained dry. His right hand was clenched into a fist so tightly that his phalanges were crushed. Some of his nails were torn off, and his bones were bent. Inside the palm was a piece of tree bark, about 5 centimeters in diameter, with jagged edges. Biologists later determined that it was part of a black hazel tree, which is not found in this part of the forest. When the body was pulled out of the water, it was placed in a transport container and taken to the Swain County morgue for an autopsy. The transport report noted that there was no muscle tension, the corpse had few signs of rigor mortis, and the signs of hypothermia were consistent with exposure to cold water for 3 to 6 hours. The autopsy, performed by medical examiner Christopher Rose on October 25th, revealed an abnormal picture. The internal bones of the chest, pelvis, and limbs were shattered, as if under pressure. However, the skin remained intact. No punctures, cuts, or signs of impact were found. Experts noted a complete absence of hemorrhages in the soft tissues. This indicates that the destruction of the bones occurred after cardiac arrest. However, the time between death and the discovery of the body was too short for such a change to occur post-mortem. The most alarming finding was the brain. According to the tomography results, it was partially destructured, characterized by compression, microcracks, and tissue edema. This pattern is characteristic of the action of a blast wave, or powerful directed pressure. However, there were no cracks on the skull. There was also no damage to the eardrums. At the same time, there were traces of microwave overheating on the inside of the skull. The official cause of death was determined to be cardiac arrest, as a result of acute neurophysiological shock of unknown etiology. No traces of exposure to electricity, chemical reagents, or shock waves were found. The skin remained intact and the hair was not singed. A further investigation of Ames' route revealed that there were no traces of his movements in the area where his last GPS signal was recorded. A service dog brought in on the third day lost the trail in an area of water breakage downstream. Hunters and tourists in the park during this period reported no unusual sounds or phenomena. Surveillance cameras installed at bridges and parking lots did not record any movement within a 3-kilometer radius of the site of the accident. The stories of Rangers James Koffield and Thomas Ames, which occurred 4 years apart in different parts of the Appalachians, invite comparison. In both cases, the men were professional foresters with extensive experience working in the wilderness. Both disappeared while on solo patrols in areas they knew well. Both were found in highly unusual circumstances, and the nature of their deaths defies logical explanation in terms of known natural or medical factors. The primary similarity between the cases is the absence of external injuries, despite the devastating internal damage. In Kofield's case, forensic experts recorded multiple fractures of all the large bones in his body, while his skin remained completely intact. Ames showed no signs of violence, but his brain tissue was utterly destroyed, as if by a directed high-energy pulse. Neither of them showed any signs of a fall, struggle, or contact with predators. Their positions at the time of discovery are also disturbing. Koffield was lying face down, as if he had fallen and not gotten up. Ames was standing waist-deep in icy water with his eyes open, his clenched fists so tense that his knuckles were broken. The condition of the objects at the scene adds to the strangeness. Kofield's metal whistle around his neck appeared to have been melted, even though there was no fire nearby. Ames had a piece of tree bark of unknown origin clenched in his hand, and his GPS device recorded that he had been motionless in the water for more than 2 hours before his heart stopped. Such behavior cannot be explained by hypothermia. At low water temperatures, muscle activity ceases much earlier. Among the unofficial theories being discussed are the effects of a rare atmospheric phenomenon, such as infrasonic vibrations causing disorientation and internal organ damage, and the intervention of an unidentified technical or biological factor. Some researchers point to geomagnetic anomalies characteristic of the Appalachian mountain region. The impact of an unknown animal cannot be ruled out, especially given the closed water bodies and inaccessible areas of the forest. What both episodes have in common is that the official reports do not contain explanations that satisfy independent experts. The cases were closed without clear conclusions about the cause of death. This makes the stories of Koffield and Ames rare and frightening examples of encounters with something unknown, in places that many consider well studied. However, 2 years after the Thomas Ames incident, in another seemingly quiet and controlled area of the park system, another episode occurred that once again raised questions about the safety of even the most studied areas. This case shocked even those who had already encountered anomalies while on duty. We are talking about a ranger named Megan Dowel and what happened to her in October 2015 at Carter Caves State Park in Kentucky. Megan Dowel, a 32-year-old ranger at Carter's Cavern State Park in Kentucky, began her shift on Friday morning. She arrived at the northwest entrance at around 7:20 a.m., signed the visitor log, and drove her white Ford Ranger toward the Cascade Trail. Her goal was to conduct a routine patrol and visually inspect the markers and footbridges after a heavy night of rain. At 7:54 a.m., Megan recorded her GPS location at the turn onto Blue Creek Hollow. She made a radio report. "I see a set of tracks, possibly a hiker. Looks disoriented. I'm approaching." The duty officer, Jason Marlowe, replied that no one had reported anyone missing. That was the last contact she made on the radio. The camera installed in her car was activated by a motion sensor when she exited the cab. The time was 7:55 a.m. The video shows her peering into the thicket, holding her radio to her ear, adjusting her cap, and strolling down the wet trail. 12 seconds later, the camera turns off. Megan does not appear in the frame again. 6 minutes later, her GPS signal is detected again, 2 kilometers from the previous location. This place is not far from Saltpeter Branch, between a rocky riverbed and the stumps of fallen trees. Search team members find her body there at approximately 10:43 a.m., when an active search begins after Megan fails to make contact for half an hour. She is completely naked. No clothing is found within sight or within 100 meters of the body. The forensic examination will record more than 90 lacerations on the torso, including injuries to the face, neck, inner thighs, and chest. The blows were inflicted with a blunt object. The nature of the injuries did not correspond to animal bites, cuts from branches, or claw marks. None of the wounds showed signs of healing, indicating that they were inflicted simultaneously within 30 to 40 seconds. Death occurred from massive blood loss within 5 to 6 minutes after the first blow. The strangest conclusion of the pathologists was the absence of fractures or dislocations. All bones remained intact. At the same time, the muscles on her back were practically torn apart. There was not a single trace of a struggle. There were no particles of skin, hair, dust, or soil under Megan's fingernails. There was no sand in her throat, no signs that she had been drowned or suffocated. No traces of ropes or scratches from rough clothing were found on the body. A small bruise was found on the parietal area of the head, but it could not have been fatal. Toxicological analysis found no traces of alcohol or drugs. Electrolyte balance was normal. The lungs were clear. The stomach was almost empty. The last meal was apparently eaten 8 to 9 hours before death. No shoe prints were found at the site where the body was discovered. The ground was damp, but no footprints could be found. The rocks on which she was lying were partially covered with algae and forest moss. There were no signs of dragging. The body was in a natural position, as if the person had fallen to the ground on their own. The official Carter County report for October 28th stated the cause of death as multiple unidentified injuries incompatible with life, sustained under unknown circumstances. It emphasized there are no signs of human or animal attack, no signs of dragging, the use of firearms or stabbing weapons were found. It has not been established how the victim traveled more than 2 kilometers in 6 minutes on foot without any means of transportation. The latest data from the GPS device showed steady movement at a speed of about 21 kilometers per hour during the first 4 minutes after Megan left the car. This rules out walking. However, there were no tire tracks near her car, nor any evidence that she could have used transportation. There were no witnesses on the trail. All routes registered that day were checked. No other tourists were in the sector within an 8-kilometer radius. According to experts, death occurred no earlier than 15 to 20 minutes before discovery. This led to speculation that the body had been moved later. However, this was refuted by the searchers themselves. The body was found precisely thanks to the GPS signal transmitted from the bracelet. It had not been turned off for a single minute since she left the car. The police and forensic experts checked all possible versions: human attack, animal attack, sudden mental disorder, escape, and external attack. None of them were confirmed. One of the employees of the laboratory, working with the Fleming County Medical Examiner's Office, later stated in an unofficial memo, "The Dowel case is the first case where the time of movement is physically impossible, and the nature of the injuries does not fit any known pattern. It was not a predator, a fall, a weapon, psychosis, or a hoax." An internal investigation by the National Park Service yielded no new information. At the time the case was closed, all records, cameras, radio communications, and GPS confirmed that Megan Dowel left the car at 7:55 a.m. 8 hours and 1 minute later, the location of the body was recorded. The time gap, 6 minutes. In May 2016, the Kentucky Department of Parks sent an official notification to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. As of October 25, 2025, no new information has been received in the Megan Dowel case. The Blue Creek Hollow Forest area is closed to visitors. Access is restricted to authorized personnel, No further public comments have been released. That's all for now. If you're interested in real stories that don't fit into a neat box, subscribe and share this episode with your friends. See you next time. Bye.